Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you today.
How are you this morning, Dr. Paul?
Doing well.
Good.
Doing
good.
well. Ready and raring to go. Solve the world's problems. Okay. And I want to talk a little bit about coronavirus. You know, that's a subject been around for a little bit. It isn't the coronavirus is the deal. It's the consequence of the fear-mongering.
Yeah.
And it's the consequence of what has been the effect on our liberties. That's the big deal because it's ongoing. But maybe we see a sign of hope right now, and we'll talk a little bit about a recent poll that came out half decent. So, but you know, the big thing over the weekend from the news that I watched was how hard can the far left come down on Trump for the way he reacted early on in the first part of the year when he heard there was a virus. And the scenario is that he knew about it, it was very serious, and then he ignored doing anything about it.
Yeah.
And I got to thinking, well, you know, the first month or two, nobody knew much about it, and it was all misinformation. And I can imagine Trump saying, this sounds pretty serious, we need to take this seriously. Well, I think that's a pretty good reaction because even those of us who have a different opinion on how to handle it, we don't dismiss the fact that this is a serious problem. What are we going to do to protect the elderly in the nursing home? Something like that. Yeah, cool. So, but Trump sort of, knew immediately that he had to be serious about it. And he early on did do some quarantine, people coming into the country, and you could argue the pros and cons on that. But at least it wasn't like he totally ignored it. And then later on, you know, he came down on the side of doing more. But the left thinks that he did too little, too late, and he's guilty, and he caused all these people to die. I think they're over the top, and I think that even this makes sense to me on how I can understand how he handled it, recognizing it was serious and not participating in the people. Maybe there were some people who already knew that we had to stir up a lot of trouble here. We have to scare people, and he didn't scare enough people. So, but now they're arguing over this. But it's pure politics, and I just don't. I'm just hope that people aren't so naive to say, well, Trump should have had the lockdown in January 30th or something like that, and he wasn't inclined to. Besides, this is at the same time that it seems like he's trying to defy the lockdowns all across the country, which I consider some good news.
And this is right at a time where it's becoming more and more obvious that the lockdowns were not only not productive, but they were counterproductive. They destroyed economies, in places that didn't lock down actually did better. But this whole thing came out of a bombshell from a book by Bob Woodward, yet again, timed perfectly for the height of the election season, coincidentally, where he reveals, and he has a tape, where Trump said, I know it's bad, like you said, I know it's bad, this is going to be a bad one, it's going to be, probably exercise his journalistic responsibilities to the people and say, gosh, I was holding this for a bombshell book and make a few $1,000,000. However, this is such a serious thing. I got to let you guys know, this Trump guy is really messing it up. No, he didn't do that. He waited till the right time.
The other thing that we all should remember when something like this comes up, you ought to be cautious and get all the facts in. Yeah. And the argument that it's horrible, and they have to do all these things, and that went on for months. It turns out that the people who were saying how bad it really was based on a lie. Yeah. And then that's what we've been talking about for months now. You know, the lying on the statistics and the reporting and the systematic approach to, you know, making things worse by these lockdowns. So I think that's probably really the big story is those people who generated all this hysteria were the ones who caused it because they lied the country and the world into it. I think the world were copycats too on this, but it was way overblown. And I think Trump maybe accidentally has come up with a position that wasn't so terribly wrong, saying, it's bad, we got to watch it, and then not wanting to cause the hysteria. And now I think that he's working to calm down the hysteria.
Well, the whole world followed China, that paragon of civil liberties, right, following their response. But that was only the beginning of this little brouhaha. But then the president went and did something over the weekend that I know you're going to talk about that just had them in paroxysms of fomenting fear and anger, he held a rally.
Oh yeah, this is, I don't know what this proves, but it proves something. It proves that Trump had a rally, and there was some local people that said, you're not supposed to do that without a mask on. So he had the rally, and you know, it was moved indoors for some reason, but they had a large auditorium, and they had 6,000 to 7,000, depends on who you read. That's a pretty good rally, especially under these conditions. So they were saying that you know, that he shouldn't have done that, and it was wrong that he did that, and everybody's going to get coronavirus and this sort of thing. And just like Sturgis and these other places, all these predictions of how bad it's going to be, and that what Trump did. But I think that I think it worked pretty well, to tell you the truth. But I've come to the conclusion, looking at all this stuff off and on, that the left, the people who are the enemies of you know, the Trumpism, I think they can't stand anybody having any fun.
Yeah, that's it.
And I guess Trump, even when he has a lot. He doesn't ignore what he has. He has some stuff to carry on his shoulder. He still looks like he's having fun, and they can't stand that. And so they have to lie their way into more problems. Besides, I guess the people that I disapprove of the most, you know, the left has always been, that would be a natural thing. But for some reason, I don't have a lot of respect for somebody who's in the Republican Party and supports, you know, the positions of Trump if it wasn't Trump. And even if somebody like that, if it's conservative, say, I've had it with you, Trump. You do things that I don't like. I don't like your foreign policy. I'm leaving. I'd respect that. But what about the governors and all these people who have a little bit of credibility with the Republican Party? They're going with Biden, you know, to support overtly Biden over this and all this stuff that goes on. That doesn't deserve much respect.
Over the lockdowns. But, you know, the politicization of this virus, and I think that's what we've been talking about from the very beginning, when you were kind of a lightning rod, when you talked about it as a hoax. And obviously it was not the virus as a hoax, but the reaction to it. And this has been our take for months, the politicization. Nowhere is it more evident than the media's response to Trump daring to hold a rally in Nevada. Here's CNN. Headline, Trump ignores science at dangerous indoor rally. Well, there's some objective news reporting, right? And you dig down in the article a little bit and talk about convenient and talk about politicization. Here's a quote from the CNN article. Major television networks decided to not send crews to cover the rally, quote, for their own safety.
Boy.
So it's just for their safety. So basically, you know, they want the tree falling in the woods and no one hears it.
Well, there was an interview on CNN. Jake Tapper, he's not the epitome of libertarianism or straight shooting. He was interviewing Peter Navarro, who's an advisor on, you know, international trade. But evidently it fell apart because it was sort of a blame game, and Tapper got really frustrated with this over the fact that Trump had this rally and how bad that was. But you know, there was also the subject came up on one of the lefty stations, and that had to do with the liability. You know, Trump. There's a bunch of lefties now say, well, Trump has to be sued for anybody that dies, especially now that he's done this. We're going to watch those people who went to Sturgis, and we went here, and the people who went to his rally in particular, and find out if they have it, and they should be able to sue the president for causing sickness and death. And the interesting thing is the attorney that was supposed to support that on CNN or MSNBC, he was not taking the strong position. You're right. He needs to deserve. You know, he needs to do it. He argued the case why you can't possibly sue somebody over that, and that fits into our argument about measurements. You know, what if they had 6,000 people and they were at the door and they got everybody's name and they go in and they check them out for the next 3 weeks or 2 weeks to find out who came up positive? Well, what does does it mean?
Nothing.
This is our whole argument.
Yeah.
Positive tests mean nothing. And you wouldn't know the timing. And if they don't get sick, they really aren't a threat to anybody. So, but once again, that's big in the news to just play politics, the politicization of this. This isn't to say that Republicans don't participate in that little trick either, but they do. But under these circumstances, I think the virus is the victim. Medical care is the victim. And well, maybe someday some people come along and maybe Fauci will lose some of his credibility.
Yeah. Well, if you go to a Trump rally or if you go to a motorcycle rally, you want to kill people. If you go to a BLM rally, you want to save people. So the virus is really smart that way. It really knows. But, and you alluded to it, which was going to be our main topic, but it is a good topic and it really plays together. And that is the further politicization of the pandemic. But the good news story is that the wall is coming down. The Berlin Wall of lies is being chipped away. And here's something that caught our attention over the weekend. Let's even look at this first clip because it's worth looking at. This is great. Public trust in CDC, Fauci, and other top health officials is evaporating. What a great word, evaporating. There's a new poll that was done by the Kaiser Family Foundation, a completely objective, nonpartisan organization, and it found that public trust in the CDC and Fauci evaporating, especially among Republicans, which is interesting. And let's look at, there's a poll that we have, or there's a chart that we have. And this is fascinating, Dr. Paul, because this, I think, speaks volumes about the fact that the people are done with coronavirus. The number of people, the percentage of people who believe the worst of this virus is behind us has met up with those who believe the worst is yet to come. This is the first time they have intersected. This is a turning point. This poll was released on September the 10th, just a couple of days ago. And this, I think, is the most optimistic, encouraging thing that I've seen in months. Seeing those two lines intersect means that most Americans are done with it.
What I'd like to see happen here in the next day or two is people who are challenging it and know it's not a strict law, it's a recommendation, go to the store, and when they start pestering them, why don't you have a mask on? They should have a little card there and say, information, the epidemic is over. Just hand
Good
it over.
news,
You know that the epidemic is over. So, but with all this stuff that's going on, WHO came out with a report. They said there's been 29 million cases. Boy, I bet you a lot of people died from that. Yeah. A lot of people did die, but it was totally distorted. And I'm going to restate this because I think it's so important. The different definition between an infection and a case.
Yes.
If you're positive, you're an infected.
Yeah.
But if you don't get sick, you're not a case.
Not a case.
But everything is reported as cases. This thing that they just reported, there were 307,000 new cases. They're not new cases. They're not new sick people. Your charts have shown the hospitals are empty. The emergency rooms are empty. And yet there are thousands and thousands of new cases every day. But the tests aren't reliable. That's one thing that people should take into consideration. But the other thing is, even if they're positive and you have more, it's because we do more testing. The United States is way high on positive tests, mainly because we probably had our eager beavers that want to make money off this make a lot of tests, and different tests are out there, so those numbers are high. But it has nothing to do with good medical policy.
Someone said this is the only pandemic in history where you got to get a test to see if you have it.
Right.
And indeed, it does sound callous, but the fact of the matter is that most of the people who died were going to die this year anyway, and it is a tragedy, and it's sad, and it's terrible. But we saw from the recent release on comorbidities that there were 2 or 3 or 4 comorbidities in about 94% of the deaths from COVID. But here are a couple of numbers from this fascinating Kaiser Family Foundation survey. U.S. confidence in the CDC has fallen 16 points since April overall. But among Republicans, and this is what I would be worried about if I were the Democrats, among Republicans or Republican governors, like a certain governor of a certain very large state in the South, we will remain nameless. Among Republicans, it has fallen 30 percentage points since April. Confidence in the CDC. Confidence and faith in Fauci is down 10% overall among Americans, but it's down 30% among Republicans. Republicans are sick of Fauci. They're sick of the CDC. They're smelling the politicization of this virus, and they're done with it.
Yes, and like I mentioned a minute ago, this also represents assuming responsibility and taking your own risk. Since there is risk, with the virus and all, but the people who go to these rallies and things and it sort of defy the wisdom of our leaders, they're taking a risk, a small risk, but they're making the decision. Fauci's not making the decision, and I think this is a sign that people want their freedoms back.
Yeah.
When somebody comes out and says, open up Texas and open up, the country, let's go get out of here. They're talking about, give me back my freedom, which I'm entitled to in a natural way, and you had no right to take it away from me. But you wonder
why people are losing faith in Fauci. Well, here's a clip that should be a good indication as to why people are sick of it. Let's look at this next clip. Here's Fauci again. It's almost like he gets upset when he's not in the headlines, so he says something crazy. Fauci, Americans can go to theaters once a vaccine has existed for almost a year. Well, doctor, who are you to tell Americans when they can go to theaters or not? And in fact, here's a reason probably why the CDC is losing its credibility. There's a lot of fires going on in the western states, California, Oregon. It's a real serious problem. Excuse me, people are wanting to wear their masks to protect. Well, the CDC came out with an interesting report. Let's put this up. The CDC has given a warning to people. Cloth masks that are used to slow the spread of COVID-19 offer little protection against the wildfire smoke. They do not catch small particles found in wildfire smoke that can harm your health. Well, ladies and gentlemen, those small particles are many, many, many
thousands of times
bigger than the COVID-19 virus. So there you go, the CDC itself undermining its credibility. But the main thing that people are furious with is the overwhelming evidence that states that did not lock down did not suffer the consequences of even states that did. And here's a tweet from somebody we know, actually, who has a pretty good way of putting it, if we can look at this. This is Senator from Kentucky, Rand Paul. The U.S. now slightly exceeds Sweden in per capita deaths for COVID. The difference? Government dictates destroyed the U.S. economy with lockdown. Sweden did not suffer the economic depression from lockdown. Will the nanny-staters learn from their terrible mistake? Good tweet, yeah.
The other thing that I think plays a role in this is in foreign policy, we heard the debates, where people will say, well, we can't leave now because we've lost 10,000 people and we have to save face, and we can't say we've wasted these lives, went in there, we've expended these lives, and now they see no signs of victory, but all they can do is say, we have to save face. And they keep doing it. That was the Vietnam thing that went on until we killed 60,000 Americans. So I think there's a little bit of this. Even when the facts come out here, well, the politics play a role in it. No matter what it is, if we can blame Trump and all this stuff, they will. But they keep doing the same thing over again. They haven't given up the principle of the vaccinations, the massive vaccination and lockdown. Fauci, they're always planning for the next one, and they're gonna have trouble. They have to be awfully frustrated. Pretty soon, they're gonna have to take a tranquilizer.
Yeah, a couple of them. We wanted to talk a little bit about an article that Jeff Tucker, and it's on the Ron Paul Institute website if anyone wants to read it. It's a really good one. It's not spent a lot of time on it, but the point really is, and he takes off from this new poll. Right when it shows that Americans are sick of Fauci, they're sick of the CDC, they're sick of being pushed around. There's a new study showing that people that dare to go out to restaurants have an increasing chance of coronavirus. But Jeff Tucker, and I encourage people to read it, he rips that report to shreds. The methodology is so shoddy. In fact, it even suggests the opposite is true.
Yeah, but they're not going to back down unless unless the people back up, and just say enough is enough. And I think that's what's going to happen. But I think that, they've complained about Trump, his first comments about when he heard about the virus and said, well, this could be bad. And then he turns around and says, I don't want to cause hysteria. But right now, they're hysterical with him again because he had the audacity of allowing people to voluntarily come together and listen to a speech. This always drove the left nuts.
Yeah.
The speeches, we wouldn't want to dissect the speeches from a libertarian viewpoint.
No way.
But the whole thing is all of a sudden, they were. I sometimes think that some of this was just to stop Trump from having rallies.
Yeah.
Because that was his whole campaign. That's what he did for 4 years now, just have big rallies. And I think they were jealous of him. And jealousy sometimes lead to hate.
Yeah.
And it's turned into hate. But I think it was a lot about jealousy. The economy was doing well and this sort of thing. And it wasn't because we had Austrian economics introduced.
Yeah.
It was the fact, of course, that we printed a lot of money and, sort of temporarily helped out. But it's I think, a good thing that the rally occurred. I think the Democrats are just crybabies, and they think that that nobody is supposed to be able to go to a Trump rally and not die.
Yeah,
I mean, they're hysterical about this.
You think that they had 4 years to come up with a better plan to get elected, and then Trump's going to kill you. Yeah. But speaking of hysteria, I just want to put this in really quick. Houston, I can report, Dr. Paul, is still completely bonkers. After church yesterday, we wanted to go to our favorite pizza place, Star Pizza in Houston. We know the place very well, and there is a table literally right at the doorway. I mean, you cannot get past the doorway where the table's there. And so I was in the parking lot, and I called the restaurant and said, hey, I know there's a mask mandate or whatever, but there's a table right there. Can we just walk in and sit right at that table? You have to wear a mask to enter the restaurant, she said. And I said, yes, but the table's right there. It's literally a foot from the door. No, you can't come in. You have to wear a mask. Then you can take off your mask when you sit down. I said, forget it. We went home and made our own pizza. But this hysteria, and it's just an insanity. That, okay, well, yeah, now that is the rule, but there is that table there. Come on in. We're happy to take your money. I'm sure they need it. It's just, it's not going away.
Yeah. It's a tragedy, but I think what we're talking about today, that means that we do have signs that the people are getting tired of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the answer. I've said this many times, the philosophers, the people who are in our universities, they create the institutions like Black Lives Matter and the radical, Marxist approach. But ultimately, you have to have the people with you. The government is a reflection of the people, so it's the ideology that will, influence the people. And I think we're sort of in between on this now, because people have to realize that if we get out of this short-term things, which we've been doing for years, that you have to get more basic on the philosophy that we have, because we're still economic interventionists. We're interventionists overseas. We still believe in the Federal Reserve. We believe that deficits don't matter, and that is what has to change. So I think we're in a temporary political fight, but because it's so precarious, I think it has given the far left and the Marxists a little bit of encouragement, and they're prepared. There are more of them out there than I ever dreamed they were. So they're prepared for it. But I think those of us who believe in liberty and the elimination of about 80% of our government, I think we have an opening here, and the people just have. When I think it's really going to occur, when it finally dawns on them, that's what happened to the Soviets. When it dawned on them, the Soviets never delivered, and they still lived with it for a long time. I just hope Americans wake up a lot sooner. They can't deliver. They just can't. They print money, and guess what? The rich people get richer, and the poor people who support it and are out in the trenches, they don't get it. So it's a failed system. So I think that once the government can't pay for it, we're going to have a lot more people join us and say, what is the answer? Well, just peek around and look at our history and look at some common sense and look at your desires. Don't you want to be a free person? You want to have just the government permission when you can go to a restaurant, and this sort of thing? That should wake up a lot of people. I hope we can wake up a few. I hope we wake up more than a few today.
Yeah, well, there is a great populist, message to be made about libertarianism. I'm going to segue toward my closing. I do want to remind our viewers, especially our super chatters, that we've got 2 weeks worth. We weren't able to roll last week because Monday was a holiday. So we're going to roll 2 weeks worth of super chat. James Cabral has been one of our most generous super chatters. So James, a shout out to you. You're a great guy. We appreciate your support. So after the show, we'll see the names of people that help keep us going. But let's do Dr. Paul, let's do a couple of really quick graphs. This is the second wave in Europe. This is why everyone's clamoring to shut back down. Put these up real quick. The top is cases. Look at those cases climb. The bottom is death. Look at those deaths disintegrate, evaporate. This is a casedemic, not an epidemic. Go to the next one. That's the UK. Here's France. Same thing in France. No deaths, increasing cases. Go to the next one. This is Spain. Same thing. No one's dying. A lot of cases. The next one. In Spain, by the way, the police tried to arrest someone without a mask on. The people from the village came in and frightened the police off, and they ran away. Let's look at the next one. I think it's the Netherlands or Italy. Same thing. No deaths. Some cases. One more. Netherlands. Same thing. So there you have it. And this is interesting, though. This is the UK, which is starting this crazy, not coincidentally, 666 plan where only 6 people can meet and a few other things. Let's look at this is the UK. This is fascinating, Dr. Paul. This is their deaths. If you have that next clip. This is the COVID-19 deaths by day of death in England. And look at it's almost done when the pubs reopen. And then look what happens. Face masks mandatory. Note, massive second wave goes here. There is no second wave, and you are here. This tells the story of what's happening. The government in the UK is off of its rocker. Let's come a little closer to Texas as I finish up, Dr. Paul, and go through these really quick. This is hospital census in the U.S. Look at those numbers. Hospitals are emptying out. Next one, please. This is closer to home. This is Texas deaths per day. Look at that decline. Massive decline. The only reason the numbers look bigger is because they're harvesting old deaths. Let's look at the next one. And this is something that we've talked about a few weeks ago. That's why people tune into the Liberty Report, Dr. Paul. We're ahead of the game. This is Bloomberg finally realizing Houston's daily COVID-19 tally inflated by months-old cases. Bloomberg finally seeing what they're doing. They're cooking the books in Houston. I wish Governor Abbott would have a look at this. And if he has a look at that, he might want to look at this next clip too. This is Parkland Hospital. Closes their COVID-19 unit as hospitalizations cease. Its third-floor tactical care unit was empty, so they had to close it out. My final word, Dr. Paul, that I haven't mentioned this in a few days. Let's look at this next clip really quickly. This is really disgusting. This is from an elementary school. You want to talk about, is this education or is this indoctrination? These are what the kids, nothing wrong with these slogans, but this is an elementary school. So again, if people are frustrated, there is a solution, and it's in the next clip, and that's go pay a visit to Tom Woods. If we get that next clip going, please. Pay a visit to Tom Woods, ronpaulhomeschool.com. We're using it. Your kids are going to enjoy it. You're going to enjoy it. Tom Woods has got some discounts for you. It's self-taught, and you're going to raise some pro-liberty kids. ronpaulhomeschool.com.
Very good. And you know, if you look around, you'll find charts that will contradict everything Daniel said because they changed the definition. And we talk about this all the time, cases versus infection. And they call anybody that has a positive test is a case, which isn't true. So they've changed the definition. And then also they had this mistake of making the projections, and it was a 1% versus a 0.1%, and it meant the difference of millions and millions of people. But that's when the scare tactics came up. But they really don't talk about it. And I say, well, do you think the left is going to come up and say, you know, we really messed up. We misjudged this because somebody mixed the fingers up. I'm sorry I didn't catch it, but we went along with it, and we still do that because we can get a chart that shows cases are going up as long as we get more tests done. And the test could, when we put all the tests together, we don't really care, and the more unreliable they are, the better, because we can show a chart of the cases going up has nothing to do with what Daniel just showed you, is that the infections and the deaths are going down. And that is really, the important thing. And I think we are at a turning point, and let's hope it's all positive, and a lot can happen between now and November. And, long term, what's going to happen in this country is that we will be forced one time to pay attention to deficit spending and too big a government. Yes, these are technical things that are important. They're political things. No matter what we do now, it's politicized, and certainly coronavirus has been politicized, but in a very serious manner, because it means a lot of extra money, lockdowns, and violation of civil liberties, and the American people are too complacent as far as I'm concerned. They should look at it and say, look at what our president's doing. This to me is astounding, that the president can be in their face, and I don't think he's endangering anybody's life. And the people that were allowed to see that last night, I don't think it wasn't on national regular television. It was very hard to find that speech. But there it is, all this huge crowd having a good time, the president having a good time, and all of a sudden, maybe the epidemic is over. I think that's the good news. The epidemic is over. Tell somebody today. Call up your list. Write to them. Tell them, hey, drop it now. The epidemic is over. And let's deal with the real problems that we should be dealing with. It is the real problem is authoritarianism versus liberty. And you'll solve all your problems. And then, of course, what we have to have is people who are involved in delivering the news and teaching our universities to have some type of a moral basis to what they're doing, and see if we can find a few people that still contain their virtue and try to do things honestly. And right now we're starved for that, and that's why this hodgepodge is coming up. But really, if you think about personal liberty, the right to your life, the right to make your own choices, the right to take risks, and the responsibility of taking care of yourself and your family. Believe me, a lot of problems would go away rather quickly. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.